What if I told you that following Jesus meant not just living differently, but dying differently? Have you ever wondered what happened to the men who walked side by side with Jesus? The men who saw him raise the dead, calm the sea, and feed the multitudes? We know how Jesus died, betrayed, tortured, and crucified. But what about his closest followers? Did they live in comfort after his resurrection? Did they fade into history? Or did they face something far more terrifying? These 12 ordinary men walked with the Son of God, witnessed miracles, and changed the world, yet their earthly ends were anything but glorious. Why were they hunted down like criminals? Why does history remember their deaths in hushed tones? And here's the unsettling truth. Only one of them died a natural death. The rest? Tortured, crucified, skinned, pierced. This isn't just about history, it's about faith, cost, and the courage to stand firm when the world turns hostile. Today, we unveil the untold endings of the 12 disciples. But beware, this story isn't for the faint of heart. Here's a fact that may shock you. 11 of the 12 apostles died brutal, often torturous deaths, and not one of them recanted their faith. Why? Because they weren't defending a philosophy. They were willing to die for a person. They saw him alive again. This is not just history. This is a testament to the strength of belief, of purpose, of truth. Let's uncover the gripping, often gruesome, but deeply inspiring end of the apostles. Peter, the bold fisherman turned rock of the early church. He once denied Jesus 3 times in fear. But after the resurrection, he was transformed. Peter preached across Jerusalem, then traveled to Rome, the heart of the empire. There, under Emperor Nero's brutal persecution, Peter was arrested. Facing death, he made one request. "Do not crucify me like my Lord, I am not worthy." So they crucified him upside down. In agony and humiliation, Peter died proclaiming Christ, even in Rome's darkest hour. Andrew, Peter's brother, was a quiet soul with unwavering faith. He journeyed to Greece, preaching the gospel in cities that worshipped idols. For this, he was sentenced to death, not nailed, but tied to an X-shaped cross, so his suffering would last longer. For 2 full days, Andrew hung there. But instead of silence, he preached to the crowds, watching him die. Even in torment, his voice pointed them to Jesus. James, son of Zebedee, the fiery son of thunder, was the first apostle to be martyred. He was arrested in Jerusalem during a wave of persecution led by King Herod Agrippa. As he stood on trial, a Roman guard was so moved by James' courage and faith that he confessed Christ on the spot. Both were beheaded together. One final act of witness, James, even in death, led another to Jesus. John, the beloved disciple. He was the only one who stayed at the cross while Jesus died. He later cared for Mary, the mother of Christ. John was arrested and taken to Rome. There, tradition says he was thrown into a vat of boiling oil, but miraculously he didn't die. Shocked and fearful, the Romans exiled him to the barren island of Patmos. There, in isolation, John received the apocalyptic visions that became the book of Revelation. He died later in Ephesus, the only apostle to die a natural death, but not without pain, persecution, and exile. Philip preached in Hierapolis, in modern-day Turkey. There, he boldly challenged the city's idol worship. He was arrested and sentenced to death by crucifixion. Even as he hung on the cross, Philip continued to preach, his final breath a declaration of the risen Christ. Bartholomew, also called Nathanael, traveled far, possibly to India and Armenia. He converted many, including a king's brother. But with influence came enemies. Tradition says he was flayed alive, his skin torn from his body, then beheaded. His crime? Preaching a kingdom not of this world. Matthew once collected taxes for Rome. Jesus turned him into a gospel writer and a missionary. He traveled to Ethiopia, where he confronted the king about his immoral lifestyle. For this, he was stabbed to death by swordsmen sent by the king. The pen that once recorded the words of Jesus. now silenced by the sword. Thomas, the doubter who demanded to see Jesus' wounds. But after witnessing the risen Christ, he traveled east, going as far as India. He built churches, baptized converts, and proclaimed the gospel fearlessly. But in Chennai, angry priests and soldiers surrounded him. He was pierced with a spear, just as he once touched the wound in Jesus' side. He died praying and believing. James, son of Alphaeus, the less humble, quiet, and often overlooked. But his devotion was anything but small. He preached in Jerusalem, where tradition says he was thrown from the temple's pinnacle, then stoned and clubbed to death. The same temple where Jesus once taught became the place of James' final stand. Jude, also called Thaddeus, spread the gospel in Persia. There, he converted many, too many for the comfort of the local rulers. He was arrested, tortured, and crucified, a martyr in a land far from home. His message never changed: keep yourselves in God's love. Simon the Zealot, who was once a revolutionary, a zealot who longed to overthrow Rome. But Jesus changed him from a warrior of violence to a servant of peace. He preached in Persia, where he refused to worship the sun god. For this, he was either sawed in half or crucified, depending on tradition. The zeal that once burned for politics now burned for the gospel. And then there was Judas, the betrayer. He walked with Jesus, shared meals with him, yet sold him for 30 pieces of silver. Overcome with guilt, Judas tried to return the money, too late. He hung himself in despair, and his name became synonymous with betrayal. But he was replaced. Matthias was chosen to take Judas' place. Tradition says he preached in the region of modern-day Georgia or Ethiopia. He was stoned and then beheaded for his unwavering faith. These weren't legends. These were real men who gave everything because they saw Jesus alive again. Not one recanted. Not one turned back. They died with courage because they knew whom they believed. Now we must ask ourselves, would we stand that firm? Would we follow that far? Would we give that much? Their blood tells a story. One of faith. One of truth. One of a king worth dying for.